I love it. Now,
Hmm.
Gary, I want to dig into one of these examples that we spoke about
Yeah.
on our previous call. You mentioned there was a company out of Asia that really leaned into their people when the pandemic started. Do you want to tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. I love that you've asked me this question because Marcus Pitt, who wrote the testimonial on the back of the book and is works for Deloitte out of Singapore, put me on to the CP group based in Thailand and the CEO Superchai Che Ravanant. And Superchai leads an organisation that has 400,000 employees across 20 countries. It is big. It's in agribusiness, so it grows food, and it also has a huge element of 7-Eleven retail stores throughout Asia. Right at the start of the pandemic, Superchai gets his leadership team together and says, hey, folks, not a single human being out of our 400,000 people are going to lose their job out of this pandemic. Now, this was repeated several times through the pandemic. So it wasn't just something he said at the start. He maintained this focus throughout the 2 years that it continued for. And he said, not one, you know what you need to do, please? You need to go to your non-human budgets, your non-salary budgets, and find savings to pay for the salaries of the people we're going to keep in our business. Right? That's a wow, right? That is a massive wow. And you need to find money from your non-salaries line items to pay for the retraining we are going to have to do and the re-resourcing with physical resources so people can do it and work from home. You need to find money to pay for that outside of the human beings' salaries.
Wow.
Also, you're going to love this. If you thought that was a wow, listen to this. He says, I want you to find out which of our 400,000 people have a partner who works for someone else who has lost their job. And because we're going to give them food vouchers because we can do that at Gross, right? We can do that cheaply. We make the food. But let's give them food vouchers so they don't have to worry about feeding themselves throughout this pandemic.
Wow.
Now, on top of that, the CP group what Superchai says, I don't need governments to tell me what I should be doing for this earth we live on. So we have a 2030 zero emissions target that we've imposed on ourselves, and by 2030, a zero waste target. So how holistic is all of that? And
right.
we're going to sustain them throughout this pandemic. We're not going to drop that stuff. Mm-hmm. We need to innovate. We need to quickly learn. We need to pivot on so many levels. Let's get up and go and do it.
And everybody who's listening is applying for the CP group jobs now.
Yeah, no doubt. Look, it's just such a wonderful example. Rob Clayton from Nutrient Ag Solutions here in Australia, they're Australia's largest agricultural business. When I reached out to Rob at the start, he goes, Gary, 48% of the food on every single plate in Australia we touch in one way or another. He goes, and as the managing director of this company, I realised we have such a massive role to play, but I've got to help the people, the 7,000 odd people in the organisation, feel safe to go to work because they need to go to work to keep serving the farmers, right? So one of their factories that they've got here in Melbourne, which would make chemicals for insecticides and stuff like that, they immediately retooled, like in days, to make hand sanitizer. Remember hand sanitizer was the big thing? Remember that? So they sent out hand sanitizer to their 750 stores around Australia. And they are literally right around, some really remote places included. And that was to help staff feel safe. But not just for them. They said, go and give the hand sanitizer to the local schools, police station, ambulances, medical centres, also our competitors, because their competitors collectively put the other 52% of the food on the plate. And the communication that they were doing for their people to help them feel safe to go to work Rob's competitors, Nutrient's competitors, started tapping Rob on the shoulder and saying, what are the messages you're giving your people to feel safe? Because our folk aren't feeling safe and they're not wanting to go to work. And he said to his leadership team, give our competitors all the information that we're sharing. All the information, because they need to stay operating like we do. What a great mindset. You know, and that was just, now, did Rob just suddenly think that way, or did he already believe that stuff? What do you think?
Well, I just can't help but remark on his abundance mindset. That to me is what you're describing, right? Is the difference between the leader who was triggered in their amygdala into scarcity, right? Because that's what disruption does. It opens up uncertainty, and that's our brain's response typically to uncertainty. But he so clearly was not triggered in that way. If anything, he went to the opportunities like that, right? And he went to the opportunities in terms of how he could serve resources to the others, right? Like the other people around him. So I think that's what I noticed. And I don't know. What do you think, Rob? Do you think that just is baked in his brain and he just had that mindset going for him? Or do you think that took some brain training?
It would obviously require a lot of healing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you would never be in that place.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you were thinking of it as a strategic move to take the other 52% of the people, if you were coming from a place of that, you would go about it differently. But clearly it's coming from a place of, I want to help as many people as I can, and this is how I can do it.
Yeah. And understanding your whole system that you're operating in, and understanding, you know what, that abundance mindset is just required. You know, this is not a time to be competitive. Now, believe you, Rob's competitive. Don't worry about that. You know, he is when he has to be. But when the world said, "Hey, we need you to do A, B, and C for the world," he was already there. And look, he's a massive reader. Loves his audio books, travels a lot, as you can imagine, although wasn't able to do it for a while. I also want to flip to a much smaller size, because I've got the really big global examples and Australian company examples, but I've also got small companies, because everyone, as we said at the start, everyone was affected. And I really wanted to show everyone. So Ben Kenyon, who's the managing director of Homewood Consulting, which is an arboricultural scientific management company, which basically means they assess trees for their health. And they do it right around the country, but they are based in Melbourne. With our states, you might be familiar with the story that in Australia, we discovered we're actually still a bunch of colonies. And the colonies have more power than the federal government. And they locked down our borders. And his business just got really hit badly. And it's a small business, you know, with 15 odd people. And he doesn't have on his little small farmlet just outside of Melbourne, you know, a big dam full of gold sitting there to pay for a pandemic, right? But he also knew this work's not going to disappear. This work is going to need to be done. So he got the folk in, and they had a really open conversation about how we're going to manage and how we're going to do this together. Excuse me, which they did. They came up with some solutions to help them get by using leave and all sorts of things, right? Lots of companies did this. But his intent was, I've got to keep as many human beings engaged and feeling safe about their income as I possibly can, but I've equally got to do that for my own family. So it's a tricky balance. Now, he did not know when he did this in May of 2020 that in June of 2021, we were going to have some extraordinary storms hit Melbourne. And those storms came from the southeast. Normally, our storms come from either the northwest or the southwest. So when you think of our old growth trees and their root systems, they're actually protecting. They're built into the ground on the eastern side of the tree, and less on, in fact, the western and northern side of the tree. That's the trees have grown that way over centuries and thousands of years to protect themselves. So this extraordinary storm event wiped out all these trees. We had thousands of homes without electricity, etc. Now, because they still had all the team said, right, the admin staff who would never normally go out said, hey, we'll drive the four-wheel drives while the arborists can assess the trees more quickly, either physically or with their drones, sometimes even moving, so that the roads could be identified to be safe to be cleared so that people could get power back and we could actually clean up this really horrific situation, which had wiped out lots of homes and all that sort of stuff. Now, if he had have gotten rid of people, got rid of headcount at the start, he wouldn't have been able to take that opportunity.
Right.
He wouldn't have been able to do that. And he wouldn't have been able to work with a couple of the folk that they've got interstate to help them sustain the business there. You know, and technology helped a lot with all of those sorts of things. So, in fact, by the end of the pandemic, the business has grown quite substantially.